Hi, everybody, and thank you so much for joining me today for Deborah Kobylt Live. And I have two very exciting guests in the studio with me today. Thank you so much for being here.
Our pleasure.
Thanks
Doug
for having us.
and Susan Segal, who are also neighbors of mine, as we've recently found out. But you wrote the most incredible book, which I finished last night, Struck, a husband's memoir of trauma and triumph. And this is the story through your eyes of what you went through from a horrific, horrible accident that Susan and your daughter were involved in. Your daughter was able to essentially walk away.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Susan was not. Wow. So you've told this story before, but I'd like my listeners and viewers to hear it again. You were driving your kid to school that day, your daughter,
I was.
because you couldn't make it.
Right.
I was taking her to school, and I pulled in actually, I took my son to school first, and then I pulled into the garage to go pick up my daughter to bring her to school, and that is the last thing I remember. I remember my garage.
Do you remember? Well, okay, essentially a bus hit you. So let's talk about what happened, the accident.
So I was
you
working.
get a phone call from
I
your
was
daughter.
working at home, and the phone rang, and it was the home phone, and I didn't recognize the number. And of course, I thought it's telemarketing. I'm not going to answer.
And this is back in 2012.
2012. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I let it ring, and I let it ring, and the answering machine for whatever didn't pick up. I finally picked up the phone, a little bit aggravated, and it was our daughter on the other end of the line saying, "Daddy, come quick. Mommy's been in a car accident."
Ugh.
And I said, "Are you okay?" And she said, "Yes." I said, "Is Mommy?" She said, "No, I don't think so." And that is how life can just turn on a dime, which I think is one of the things that really resonates with people who read the book, is that, this notion of there, but for the grace of God,
I have to bring this up.
Yeah.
There's a part in the book, very early on in the book, where you say, you've been married for a while, a lot of people have been married for a while, and you say to yourself, ugh, got to get out of this marriage somehow. What can I do?
You're going to bring that up, Deborah?
Maybe she'll
aren't
get
you?
hit in the head with a brick. I mean,
Yeah,
whatever.
exactly.
Oh, boy. And then all of a sudden you get this kind of news.
Right.
What did you think? A lot of people think that way. Initially you're like, how can I get out of this?
Yeah.
What was going through your head at that moment?
I guess the thing with the book is I really wanted to be transparent
You
about
were.
what it's like to be in a long-term marriage and relationship, and really be honest about everything that I was feeling and thinking beforehand and when the accident hit. And one of the things when something like this happens, it just strips away all the trivialities of the petty arguments that you find yourself getting caught up in on a daily basis. For us, it was sort of the dishwasher we joke about.
Why is it always about dishwasher, garbage, dog poop? Stuff like
How
Because
you
that.
put the toilet
it's-
paper roll on.
Yeah, it's easy to transfer, I think, any other kind of anxiety into those little things rather than really talk about whatever the deeper issues are. But when something like this happens, you really get reminded of the foundations of a relationship and why you were together in the first place, and that heart and the humor and the love. And that's kind of, in a bigger sense, that's kind of what my life got reduced to when this happened, just stripped down to the basic core elements of love and support and friendship, and all of that other stuff, sitting in traffic and
Money
being
issues.
aggravated about that. Yeah, it just became irrelevant. It became trivial. It was like, that stuff's going to all work itself out. It's all going to figure itself out.
Well, it's interesting because you had a phone meeting that morning, which you never did get to. And that's the reason why you drove your daughter to school. You had a phone meeting. And as it turns out, I don't want to really be a spoiler and a spoiler alert, but I don't know, that meeting may or may not have turned into something, right? And as it turns out, it didn't even matter whether you got the job, you didn't get the job. Insignificant. What was significant is what was happening with Susan at that moment.
Well, the other things then to look at are, I usually drove my daughter to school. I drove her in a Prius. Susan was driving a big, heavy BMW. And if on that day, if everything had remained the same, and it was me in that situation in our Prius, I don't think that either of us would have walked away. Nothing against the Prius. I love the Prius.
No, but it's not
just
the
not a
same.
big, heavy car. And to withstand, for those who don't know the story, she was hit head on by a Los Angeles city bus and pushed a whole city block.
And that happened, let's back it up a little bit,
Yeah.
because there was construction going on, right?
Well, there was a truck had parked itself on a perpendicular street to Hollywood Boulevard, and then he got out of the car and didn't set his brake or didn't chock his wheel, put a wedge in front of his wheel, and driverlessly that truck slid into Hollywood Boulevard, and a bus going westbound swerved to avoid it, lost control, crossed into oncoming traffic, and then hit Susan and Alice head on. I mean, you couldn't script this accident because people would go, it's a little...
Look at that photo.
It's a little contrived.
Wow. Are we showing that photo currently? It's impossible. Oh, how many times have we passed accidents and
Yeah.
you say, please, God, let that person have
There,
lived.
before the grace of God go I.
Yeah.
So you're driving toward the accident. Your daughter calls you. You're in the car. She's like, come now.
Right.
You jump in the car. It's how it is at that moment. You see sirens. You could see it happening. You come through the back. You said you parked and you ran in there and you're looking for your wife. And it made me so sad. You said she was reaching out for somebody to help her.
Yeah, she was in shock. And reaching out, and they wouldn't let me get close to her. I mean, the thing is also you hear, I was in an accident, right? And you think, okay, a fender bender or something like that. And I came on to this accident and couldn't believe what I was seeing. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that our daughter was alive and standing on the corner and holding her. I remember looking over at the car and seeing Susan and just having trouble processing all of that.
How can you? And you went with your daughter because they wanted her to be checked out, understandably, that it was a horrifying crash.
Yeah.
Leaving her behind. And that's something that I think anyone would have done. You go with your daughter to make sure your daughter is okay. But as I was reading that, I thought, geez, I wonder, was she pissed off later when she found that out? But you had to do that. You have to go with your daughter.
No, I know.
I'm joking.
I know you are. But it was definitely a Sophie's Choice moment.
Yes.
But, who knew where I was headed, and she needed the help. So
No, I was actually being
I know.
facetious at a time I shouldn't have
No,
been.
but it's a great point because a lot of people bring it up and say, how'd you do that? How'd you make that choice?
I would have done the same thing.
And I think most would. And
Yeah.
I would have wanted him to.
Yeah, it's your child.
You
And you
know,
want to make sure she didn't have some kind of internal damage, and that's the
Right.
thing you have to do.
It's funny because Susan often teaches she teaches parenting, and one of the things that she has
I could have
taught
used
is
you.
that the spouse comes before the kids. That's good modeling. A lot of people put their kids needs in front.
But I
of
know
their
what you're
spouse's
saying. In this
needs.
case, it's
in this
different.
case,
Yeah.
it was completely different. And my 11 at the time daughter saying, "Daddy, stay with me while she's rushed off in a hospital." I had to do that. And Susan, she was in shock. She didn't know that I was there. I knew that all of the first responders.
I was calling for my friend and neighbor Suzanne.
Not him. You're calling for the neighbor. It's like, Suzanne. It's like, oh, well,
That'll tell
we
you
have
what-
our priorities,
That'll tell you my pecking order, right?
especially at the time,
No,
right?
but Suzanne's very capable. It's just funny. We all giggle. We'll follow her out in an earthquake or something.
Do you remember any of that? Because you said you don't remember.
I really don't remember. I remember a lot of the delusions and things that you read about in the book, and they feel real to me still. I remember, again, some of the angel experiences, and they feel real to me still.
Tell me about some
But
of
I
them. Go
don't
ahead.
remember the day. I don't really remember anything till almost getting into rehab in Cedars 3 months later, maybe. And the fog cleared, Doug likes to say.
But then did you remember the accident at all? Or does our brain
Never.
just shut it down?
Never, and it's a gift because it allowed me to sort of wake up and say, ooh, I have to get better. I want to get back to life. And had I remembered it or understood the deep amount of trauma, I don't know if I'd be as good as I am now.
The brain is a remarkable thing, a remarkable protective device. Even our daughter, who remembers seeing the truck swerve into traffic and the bus swerving to avoid it, she remembers thinking, this is not going to end well. But she doesn't remember anything else
Impact.
until she was conscious a few minutes or a few seconds later, and being in the car and kissing Susan goodbye and not knowing is she ever going to see her again. I mean, that whole morning was just a horrible
that no one should go through.
That no one, I mean, then that people that you fear, and you know, you talk about this in terms of that you pass by these accidents. Well, this happened very near the school that we went to, and so a lot of our friends actually passed the accident not knowing who was in the car. And then when they found out, it just hits home harder that how easily some of these things, except for luck, couldn't just be us. And we can't dwell on that. You know, you can't stay focused on that, but you can appreciate when it isn't you.
I have a very dear friend, I'm sorry to say, was driving to pick up his daughter in Malibu, and there was an ambulance. Yep, that was her.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a horrible. Did
Sadly,
she make it?
no. And she didn't make it. And they have a foundation now to honor her, and they do a lot of great work. So imagine that.
Yeah.
You know, he's driving past, not realizing, and then all of a sudden the wife called and said, I don't know where she is. And they said, oh, hang on a minute. The police are on the phone. And then he put two and two together and thought, oh, no.
Yeah.
So imagine.
No.
Things, you're right, not even on a dime, on a split millisecond.
You never know what will happen when you wake up in the morning. You could get hit by a bus.
I love that somebody said that at the very end.
Yeah.
Right? Where were you? Were you?
We were
in the airport in London. Yeah.
And what did somebody said? What did they say?
We were talking because there had been a terrorist attack fairly recently
on the Bataclan and all the in Paris, which is where we were going.
Right.
And people were saying, "But I can't believe you're still going to Paris with that having just happened." And we had talked about it and made the decision that we have to continue to live our lives. You know, you can't.
We do the same thing.
We can't live in the fear of what might happen. We keep going. And so when we said this to this lovely Irish couple, they just sort of said, "Oh, good for you." You know, because you never know what's going to happen when you wake up in the morning.
Excellent
You might get
accent.
hit by a bus. And we just looked at each other.
The whole
we
family.
hadn't told them our story at all.
No, they didn't know anything.
Did you lift up a picture and say, well, guess what? I do have news for you. You're right. They probably, no, it's too shocking, right? You just look at yourselves and go, isn't that the truth?
Yeah. I mean, it's a cliche that became our reality.
I do want to tell you, but back to your other story about the tragedy in Malibu. I don't know that I would have been here had something happened to Alice, our daughter, because had I woke up and found out that news, I'm not sure
I've never seen so much resilience to the point where I can hardly talk about it, but they can.
Wow.
So they are remarkable people. So, but back to your story.
Yeah.
So
ours is
I
a good
was
story.
particularly taken by your delusions. Now, that happens from, I'm assuming, the medicines that are given to her, or just what's going on with the brain, or what?
I never knew, and there were a lot of different theories. One is that it's a brain trauma, a brain injury, because she had one of those amongst a broken neck and broken ribs and broken arms and broken pelvis and broken leg and severed Achilles and broken knee. I mean, basically everything from top to bottom.
And infections and high fevers and wondering, oh no, again.
So she was in the ICU for several weeks. And so you have the brain trauma as one contributor. You have ICU syndrome, which is basically being in a room where there is no night or day, and you're constantly being woken up at all hours, and that affects your brain, and it's very common for people in the ICU to have delusions and hallucinations and all. And then you have the drugs, and then you have what I also attribute her healing is the fact that I think at a certain point her brain just disconnected and said, I need to focus on you healing. I need to disconnect pain receptors. I need to disconnect all of these things. And in doing so, I'm also going to disconnect a little bit of your connection to reality. And
we're going to have some fun over here.
Yeah,
I'm going to send some angels, but I kind of believe that in a way, though.
She wasn't on drugs at a certain point
Wow.
and was still having the delusions and was out of the ICU. And we have a friend who's a doctor and many other friends who are doctors who were saying, oh, well, she'll snap out of it. This is common. She'll snap out of it. And it took a very long time.
They were concerned.
But other people that, look, one of the reasons why I wrote the book is that though Susan's story in survival is miraculous, it resonated with a lot of people who, as I say in the book, everybody's got their bus. Everybody's been hit by something. And her recovery has inspired other people's recoveries as well, or inspired other people dealing with whatever trauma or difficulty they have in their life. And I've heard from many people, oh, thank God, I read this, and then my father was in an accident, and he was having delusions, and had I not read your book, I wouldn't have known that was a normal thing, and I would have been more freaked out. Then that's one aspect of sort of people finding comfort, not comfort in our story, but at least feeling like, okay, I'm not alone in my struggle, my difficulty.
I would also like to add, this is a fun read.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I mean that. Like, I don't want people to say, oh my gosh, this is tragic. Through your prism, I actually I almost got the intensity and the seriousness and also some of the fun. Mm-hmm. You're so real with everything, including talking about your marriage, pre-accident, during this, and now here you are. Mm-hmm. I found it refreshing. I found it fun. I found it very real and relatable, which is what I loved about it. I think there's lots of takeaways from this book. Yeah. But it was an enjoyable read,
Well, there's a lot of comedy even in the
darkest places. There's a lot of comedy.
Places,
there's a lot, and you're so well written. I mean,
Thank
you're clearly
you.
a writer. So
comedy and tragedy so close together. It's interesting you say that, only because a few people have said to me, and in fact, we're doing a book club tomorrow night, and they were like, "Oh, that's depressing," and I said, "It's not. It's not a depressing story." But I think that will be interesting to address with this group, this book group, because when people come at it that way, they don't realize the connection of.
Well, let's talk about this one. The Diet Coke. I mean, you wanted that Diet Coke. You were constantly.
I was so thirsty, Deborah.
You wouldn't stop. And I actually, now to me, that said to me, it was humorous from my point of view. A woman
I thought it was funny too when I woke up and realized that's all I wanted.
Was a Diet Coke. And you weren't going to give up. You wanted it. And even when he said, you can't, and you're like, a day or two later, do you want anything? I want my Diet Coke and I want to get out of here. You were determined to survive and get better,
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really a great point. I don't know. I liked my life. I wanted to continue living with my husband and my kids and friends. And so, as I was saying before, because I don't remember any of it, I woke up and had a mission. How do I get better? What do I do? I was thirsty.
I got parenting classes to do.
I got friends to go out with. I got to do anything anybody will hire me to do.
Yes, you're an actress as well, so hey.
But that was it. I was very thirsty, and I guess in all of it, I think I'm generally funny. You may not know that.
I can see that about you.
I think I'm generally funny, not intentionally, but it seems the way my life and personality has gone. And so all of that became humorous. I called my dear friend over and was like, I have to tell you something. And when she leaned in, get me a Diet Coke. And she couldn't imagine what I was going to say.
But I think it is that persistence and that stubbornness and that drive that all contributed to her survival. I mean, the Diet Coke was a manifestation of
no
just
doubt.
Like, I want this. I want to. I mean, it was that. I want to go home. Both of those things, even being completely unrealistic, and about the ability to go home. It was like, I'm going home. And, she was in a halo with casts all over every limb. She couldn't sit up in bed, but was still working to get up and go.
How did you get your muscles? Because as women, or most people, we're thinking, ugh, my body's going to look awful. What am I going to feel like? I'm going to feel like blubber. How did you get past that?
I was very thin because I didn't eat for almost 3 months. So I was feeling good that way. But
it's terrible to say.
I know it's terrible to say, but
you don't want to get hit by a bus and have it happen.
Sure,
but I get the small uptick. There you go.
There you go. But, the road to recovery was arduous and lots of little steps from
Lots
even
of
getting
little
into
steps.
the wheelchair was an effort. And, I it really wasn't till almost a year, maybe almost 2 years after that I really started walking. I still keep a cane in the car and bring it with me, and now.
Just in case.
Well, if I'm coming on terrain I'm unclear of,
Yeah.
or steps I'm not sure of, I don't want to fall. They terrify you about that for anything as you get older, but especially someone like myself. But so, getting back in shape just was a process and I still have miles to go, but it's just a process, each little step. I mean, even today, like, I can do that now. And then it's always one step forward, 10 back.
You're funny. You should be doing comedy.
Thank you, yes.
No,
I'm
really.
going to do
You
a
should
set right
some-
now for you on
You should-
Deborah Kobylt Live.
No, you should really weave this into some kind of act because I'm feeling it right here.
I like
I'm
that.
telling you.
I keep telling you.
I do comedy, so I'm
You do?
feeling this a
When are
little
you
bit.
performing? I'm coming up. No.
I'll let you know. I have a couple of dates.
Sure. Who knows where all of this, who thought we would write a book and have a platform? I'm still so touched when people come up and talk about, I left my cane behind after I saw you, or that kind of thing. I never dreamed we'd have a platform that, as cheesy as it sounds or corny, was an inspirational one. And that's been joyous.
I think also, one of the things about Susan is, though she may have said, why did this have to happen? She never said, why did this have to happen to me? And didn't become defined by it or become a victim by it. She didn't dwell in the past of, I used to be able to do this and now I can't, and how depressing it is that I can't. It was mostly, I need to get up and walk. I know that that's a simple little thing that I took for granted, but that's what I need to do. And it was very much in the present, in the moment. And I think that sometimes when you think about what you were able to do, that and now are trying to get back to it, that can be
Daunting.
and depressing,
Well,
and demoralizing.
I can relate to that because I was doing marathons a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
And I busted my knee, and then I busted the other one, and then I had surgery, and then I had this. And frankly, I can't do that anymore. I just can't. And I don't even think I ever once said, "Oh man," I'm just moving on. So I'm
Sure.
finding now I'm getting on a bike, so
Yeah.
I'll just figure something
That's
else to do.
wonderful, yeah.
I do think that's true. I think if you really, you've got to move on, because if you dwell, I think that's also bad for your physical health too.
Absolutely. I mean, and I think I was telling you a little bit about this, but I think my optimism really helped me survive, just wanting to get back into life and not thinking about anything else. A friend of mine the other day, Suzanne, said to me,
Suzanne, the one who she was calling for
Yes.
instead of you.
The
Suzanne.
savior.
Hello, Suzanne.
Hello, Suzanne. She was just saying, I still can't believe you weren't freaked out. And I don't know why I was, especially in the halo and all of those contraptions. I'm not, I guess I felt like I had to cooperate. I don't know who told me to cooperate, but
It's like,
felt
dude,
like the right road.
Let me look at that photo. It's like, this is out of my control. I have to cooperate. I'm in a
Yeah.
halo. I'm laying here. You wanted her in constraints at one point, remember?
Oh.
Because she was pulling out her
She
nose
kept pulling
too.
out again that determination of, or I don't like this, so I'm going to pull
I
it
didn't
out.
care for that.
Honestly, I'm surprised that she didn't just get up and take a taxi and come home.
She would. She tried
you
to.
would've. You would have. That's why he
She
wanted you in
tried to.
I
constraints.
couldn't stand up though.
I know.
No, I know, but yeah.
But that's
think
where your head was at.
Another
yeah.
big part of the whole story, as you know, and her healing and aspect of the book is the community and how love and the power of love and prayer, outside prayer, and just people sending that energy and thought and support, as well as meals and rides and everything else that our community did for us, was a huge, huge part of our story and the healing. And for
Feeling the
me
love.
also, to be able, I didn't know it at this time because the book is based on these emails that were sent out
Right.
at the time of the accident. I didn't realize how therapeutic they were for me at the time. I didn't realize when I sent one of these out and I got 100 emails back saying, Doug, please keep writing, please keep sharing, and we're with you and we love Susan. And that was my therapy. and
Well, because how do you go through this? I mean, you're watching your wife from day to day. You're not quite sure what's going to happen. Even when she's out of the woods, she's not really out of the woods,
Right.
and you've got to keep it together for the kids, especially your daughter who was right there. I can't imagine being in your shoes. And you found such strength. Where did it come from? Just the love for your wife?
He's very controlling.
Yeah. I got that from the book.
Right. I think it's a combination of things. I think, I have a background in movies and TV, and so I'm a producer, and so I'm used to having a lot of departments and handling a lot of departments.
And chaos. So.
And chaos.
Yeah,
and
that's
crisis,
a good point, though.
And things
That's
happening,
true.
changing day by day, and having to adapt and adjust to that. So I had been in that mode work-wise. This, obviously, the stakes were much higher, being that it was my wife's life. But I think that was part of it. I think that, again, the support that we had and trying to normalize life at home for the kids and keep them as on track with their lives as possible.
Which you did. But inside, it was chewing them up. I mean...
It was tough it's interesting, these things. Our daughter, who at the time was, so reticent to set foot in a hospital because they're scary, and to see her mom and what are they going to find, and is she going to be the same, person, just not wanting to go, and our son too, just being afraid of that environment. Now, in retrospect, our daughter is hoping to go into medicine, and because she saw how that the doctors and nurses and the healing, not just for her, but for Susan, but for Al as well, was
and for her.
Yeah.
The doctor in particular, Dr. Allison?
Yeah, Daniel Allison.
Incredible doctor.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Beyond. I mean, everybody feels that way, but he was cute too, so that made it really excellent.
So when he came in the room, you're like, uh-oh.
I was like,
I got to straighten up.
Yes,
It's
exactly.
if I can. It's like...
No, but he had some beautiful kindness and obvious skill because here I am.
Yeah.
He also, look, he was also very gentle. And this is a tricky thing for doctors because he didn't want to say, oh, she's never going to be the same, or be careful, this might happen or that might happen. All of these things that you hear about, or I heard about afterwards, with the pneumonias and the blood clots and the strokes and the things that not necessarily the bone breaks would cause, but the recovery from that, all the things that could go wrong. He just sort of, again, it's this living in the present, living in that moment of like, let's just deal with what we have right now. Right now she's doing well, or right now she has a fever, and we're going to address the fever. And in retrospect, he looks back at it and says, she was really lucky not only to survive the accident, but to survive the aftermath of the accident.
And also, he was amazing. And one of the very first things he said to me, if you want to live a normal life and get off the oxy and all of that immediately, which I did. I didn't like it anyway, but I mean, he put that right out there and made it.
Wow, that's interesting.
It was. He made it and I can remember that moment too, and he made it a priority. You don't have an option if you're still doing that. And I was the perfect person to do that, so I really remember that moment, him saying.
And we've met people since who have been in their own accidents and have said, I can't, but then they hear Susan's story and say, you know what? If she can do that, I'm going to do that. I'm going to get off this stuff. And as Susan said, I'm going to leave my cane behind, or I'm going to leave this crutch that I was relying on. I'm going to leave it behind. I'm going to get on with my life. And that's the beautiful part about the book, and what we're doing now in this conversation with you too, is when it helps people.
It helped me.
Get through their stuff.
Well, it's exciting in that
me.
way. I never would have thought that.
Okay, here's a question I have to ask.
Go, Deborah.
Are you kind of glad it happened to bring you here?
It's been asked before, and I would say no physically. I would say no physically. I mean, I have my issues every day, just like we all do, but now mine are multiplied, and I feel like I got to go traveling and do things now because it's already hard to hike my sorry body up the steps or whatever. But in the beauty to have my husband's writing get recognized in this way, to go on your show, the Today Show, to have people call, to feel the love that way. I don't know for something so dramatic and traumatic, and I don't know that would have happened any other way. And I wonder all the time, was it meant to be so that we would be able to spread this inspiration? I don't know.
Tell me about the angels.
The angels. Well,
They were hugging you.
they were hugging me in the operating room, and apparently my father and Doug's brother lifted the bus off me, and
Who are both no longer
who are
alive.
both no longer with us. And my grandmother protected my face, who used to always say to me, "Susela, you beautiful, whatever.
Susan, you're gorgeous.
You're gorgeous." So she protected my
And
face.
I'm gonna put a shield there.
And then another friend of a
Susan.
friend called and said, "I knew you were okay because I could see your umbilical cord connected to the sky." And so, or some
Wow.
some cord, or not umbilical, I don't even know. And I was like, really? Oh, that's interesting. And then, of course, there's the famous story at the very end of the book, which was a living angel. And for me, I think that kind of says it all in the world of angels. And do we reveal that? Maybe.
I like spoiler alerts because I'll still read the book. So if you want to reveal it, go ahead.
The person that rescued Alice at the very end, we ended up meeting up again with on a Martin Luther King Day, and at a celebration, a multicultural celebration. And when we hugged, we kissed. She had asked about this accident that was close by her home. And when we finally all introduced ourselves, I know. And she held Alice's hand, and actually you could jump in and tell that piece of the story.
It just was, again, it was on Martin Luther King, a celebration, and when she got out of the car, when Alice got out of the car, she came down from her apartment building and found her there, and
Wow.
and said to Alice, "Is that your mother in there, in the car?" And Alice said, "Yes," and she said, "Well, let's pray for her together." And Alice looked at this woman, and a very kind, warm African-American woman with a large cross on her neck. And Alice said, "Okay, but you should know I'm Jewish." and the woman said, "That's okay, because in here we're all the same."
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
She would come to this interview with us. She's come around with us.
And-
I would love that.
I just thought of that as I was sitting here, and sometimes she does, and I know.
I only have a couple minutes. So
Okay.
what do you want to make
So,
sure?
I want to tell you that the final angel thing is that her name was Susan Douglas, which was so crazy.
Oh.
Yeah, so crazy when we finally met her. What do you want to make sure that people know?
I think that one of the stories and things that comes up a lot and has was initially Susan would bristle at, and I write about in the book, is this notion of, well, I guess you were saved for a reason. I guess you're here for a reason. That
People say
similar
that
to
all
this
the time.
question of, are you what are the positives that have happened about this? And Susan, her response at that time. There was an X-ray technician who we were with, and he was looking at her X-rays and saying, "My God, is there anything that you didn't break?" And Susan said, "No, why, there really isn't." And he said, like many others, "Well, I guess there's a reason you're still here," which made Susan kind of, in her
Crazy.
her comic way, saying, "What reason did I need? To
get hit by a bus.
I have a good life. I love my husband. I love my kids. I have good friends. And he said at that time, "Well, has your story inspired anyone?" And she said, "I suppose it has." And he said very simply, "Well, then maybe that's reason enough."
Yeah.
And for us, that's why we're here. That's why I wrote the book.
That still gives me a
and
chill.
That's why.
To
That's
even hear
beautiful.
that story, and I know it's corny, but
It's not. It's real life. It's real.
It's the real life inspirational.
And for what you went through and your beautiful words, they are beautifully written words, but they came right out of your heart. It's just really incredible. I also like the one part where you talk about, being intimate again, and how that wasn't particularly, easy. But you went for it,
Sure.
and I love that too. There's a lot of just whimsical and fun parts to this book, and I really want people to know that.
So sweet, yes.
Because that has a lot to do with your healing.
Yeah.
And particularly you, bravo to you for all you went through. Everyone talks about Susan, but through your prism, we have Struck. And I just think it's a beautiful book, and you're a beautiful couple.
Oh, well, thank you, Deborah.
You look like newlyweds to me. Just
Oh,
the
you're
way
sweet.
the
We're
way
coming
you
up
look
on our
at-
30th.
Yeah, really?
Well,
Wow.
next year.
Wow. But
and
the
it
way
was
you
Doug's
look at each
birthday.
other.
Most of the time.
Yeah.
No, we have.
You do.
we
You have that little giggle going.
You know what? We're pretty lucky, all
Yeah.
things considered. I'm still here. Everybody's okay at the moment. And there, before the grace of God, go we.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I hope this becomes a film. You're in the business, maybe you can make that happen. But I really see this as a film. I think it's a beautiful film. A friend of mine makes Lifetime films. I think
That's
we should
where,
send.
yes, we should do that.
It's a very good friend of mine, and I think that we should present this over to him. I really do, because
love
I
it.
see this on a Lifetime sort of story film, don't you?
Yeah.
So maybe
You know
I'm
what?
part of the story now too. I know
Yes,
somebody
exactly.
who does that.
You come be part of the story.
Yeah, no, I don't mean in the story, but we're all sort of connected in one way,
We are,
right? Because you
and-
never know. Because I just think that's where this belongs
And
next.
there is a lot of commonality in our
Yeah.
story with others.
Yeah, there's no doubt.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being
Oh,
here.
my goodness. Thank you, Deborah. It's too short.
No,
we
I
want to
know
hang
it's
out
too
all
short.
day.
Well, we can. We live near each other. So actually, my husband would love this too. I
Oh.
was reading excerpts to him, and he was watching baseball. And I said, "Oh my God, you won't believe this!" And he's like, "Wow, who are these people?" So I'm actually going to have him read this as well. So
We're local LA. So.
yeah,
Thank you.
no, you really are. But thank you very much for sharing this. I'm glad you're okay. I'm glad your family has survived this and come out the other side to teach us so much and to, just to share just so many wonderful stories. Sad
A man
stories.
sharing, too, is
Well, that's what's
always
important
so
about this.
important.
Gosh, I have only like a minute, but you did say to me on the phone that it's also about a man's evolution. What did it teach you in terms of caring for someone?
Well, I think that women generally, and it's a generalization, have built-in support groups and are easier sharers with each other about intimate things in their life, and that men, one, don't necessarily have the outlets, and two, don't feel comfortable
Right.
about
Or
that
just don't.
expression.
And
or just
don't.
don't.
I have 3
Internalize-
boys and a husband,
Yeah.
and
Oh, boy.
yeah,
and
I'm the only one who talks. They're like, you talk too much. So
And if I don't talk, my family's mad at me. I'm like,
yeah, it's but you express this. I think this is a great lesson for men too in this book.
Thank you.
On how to express yourself. It's just beautiful.
it is.
It's beautiful. I interrupted you.
I think so, too.
But that's actually a great way to end this. It's like, I interrupted you and I'm so sorry.
not a worry.
Not a
But anyway, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for
Please,
having
everybody,
us.
pick up this book, Struck. And you're doing a book club, you said, tomorrow on
We
it.
do a
Tomorrow
bunch
night.
of book clubs.
Yeah, you
and-
do
and-
them
and-
on Skype.
Yeah, we're doing, We tried
Yeah.
to do one. We were a failure at it, but now our next one I think we've got down.
You got it down.
Which
If people
one?
want to
The
get in touch with you,
Nancy's who left her.
if people want to get in touch with you to do that, how can they do that?
DouglasSegal.com.
Spell
It-
DOUGLA.
DouglasSegal.com, and there's a place where you can reach out to me, and we love doing them. We love
Yeah, they're
we
really
love hearing
wonderful.
people's stories. We love how so many people have different lenses that they look at this, whether
yes.
it's caregiving or long-term marriage or parenting or surviving a trauma. There's so many different lenses to this story, and we love hearing how I particularly responded to this bit in the book. And it's like, oh, well, this part is the part that really moved me, and that's great.
I was moved by most of it, but that Diet Coke part just said to me,
That
this
struck you.
girl, that's why she survived, I'm telling you. So,
And then I hated it when I drank it.
there you go. Anyway, thanks so much for being here and sharing this. Please get in touch with them if you would love to do a book club with them. I'm telling you, we got to see this into a movie. The book is called Struck, A Husband's Memoir of Trauma and Triumph. Thank you so much for being here, everybody. And you can watch us on Facebook and YouTube And we'll be tweeting out about this as well. Also on Instagram, we put all of our promos. But if you listen to your podcasts, we're on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and just about any place else where you get your podcasts. Thanks for tuning in to Deborah Kobylt Live, and we'll see you next time. Bye.